It has been 1,000 days since Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, an act that sent shockwaves across the globe and continues to reshape international relations. This grim milestone was marked by a significant escalation: Ukraine's use of a long-range American missile system to strike deep into Russian territory. At the same time, Russia unveiled an updated nuclear doctrine, further heightening tensions in a world already on edge. The doctrine emphasizes the potential use of nuclear weapons if Russia were to face an attack by a conventionally armed country allied with a nuclear power. As these events unfolded, world leaders convened in Rio de Janeiro for the G20 summit, underscoring how interconnected and complex the global repercussions of the conflict have become. The summit brought together key figures to address a broad range of issues, from economic fragmentation to climate change, while the shadow of the ongoing war loomed large over the discussions. On the battlefield, Ukraine took a bold step by deploying the Army Tactical Missile System, a long-range missile system supplied by the United States, to target an ammunition depot in Russia near the Kursk region. This move not only represents a significant escalation in the conflict, but also signals Ukraine's intent to strike at critical Russian logistics hubs and command control sites. The Kursk region has become a focal point in recent months, with Ukrainian forces having seized key areas over the summer. However, the situation remains volatile as reports indicate North Korean troops have joined Russian forces in efforts to reclaim the territory. This new alliance between Russia and North Korea has introduced an unsettling dynamic, further complicating an already fraught conflict. Ukraine's calculated strikes aim to disrupt Russian military operations and diminish the effectiveness of this new partnership. In the coming days, analysts anticipate additional strikes targeting logistics hubs and command sites, designed to safeguard Ukrainian positions and impose strategic costs on Russia for its reliance on North Korean troops. As the war in Ukraine rages on, its impact is felt far beyond the battlefield. The G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro served as a stage for leaders to address the broader implications of the conflict and to redefine alliances in a rapidly shifting geopolitical landscape. For years, Latin American countries have strengthened ties with China, which has become the region's largest trading partner outside the Americas and a key investor in infrastructure projects. The recent inauguration of a major port in Peru, built with Chinese assistance, exemplifies Beijing's expanding footprint. These developments underscore a critical question: is the United States losing its influence in the global South? President Joe Biden, who arrived late to the photo session, symbolized a United States increasingly viewed as out of step with the shifting priorities of emerging economies. As leaders look beyond his administration, questions about America's future leadership loom large. One of the most discussed undercurrents at the G20 summit was the specter of a potential return of Donald Trump to the presidency. The former president, likened by some attendees to Voldemort from Harry Potter, he who must not be named, remains a polarizing figure. Trump's proposed policies, including a plan to impose sweeping global tariffs, have raised concerns among allies and adversaries alike. French President Emmanuel Macron cautioned that such policies could fracture the international order, creating a system where the strongest nations dictate terms to the detriment of all others. Yet, not all leaders at the summit shared this apprehension. Argentina's president, who recently met with Trump at Mar-a-Lago, demonstrated his support by reversing Argentina's position on a global tax proposal for the ultra-wealthy. This pivot underscores how Trump's influence continues to resonate with some leaders, even as others express apprehension about his potential return to power. In the final months of his presidency, Joe Biden is making a concerted effort to cement his legacy, particularly on environmental issues. His recent visit to the Amazon rainforest marked the first time a sitting U.S. president has toured the region, a symbolic gesture underscoring the administration's commitment to combating climate change. Biden announced the creation of an International Conservation Day and pledged new financial support for Amazon conservation efforts. These initiatives aim to reinforce investments in clean energy infrastructure, which the administration hopes will remain irreversible regardless of future political shifts. However, skepticism remains. Environmental groups such as Greenpeace Brazil have cautioned that while policies can be reversed, the long-term consequences of inaction or delay could prove far more difficult to undo. As Biden prepares to leave office, the question remains whether his efforts will lead to lasting change or be overshadowed by shifting political winds. The ongoing conflict in Ukraine The growing influence of China in Latin America and the uncertainty surrounding U.S. leadership have laid bare the fractures within the global order. The G20 summit highlighted these divisions, with leaders grappling with challenges ranging from economic inequality to climate change. The events of the past 1,000 days have demonstrated how a single conflict can reshape the geopolitical landscape. Ukraine's struggle against Russian aggression has not only tested the resolve of its people, but also forced the world to confront difficult questions about power, influence, and the future of international cooperation. As Ukraine continues to defend its sovereignty, and as the global community grapples with the fallout of this protracted conflict, one thing is clear. The decisions made today will reverberate for generations to come. Whether through diplomatic efforts at summits like the G20 or strategic moves on the battlefield, the world's response to this moment will shape the course of history. As the curtains closed on the G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro, President Joe Biden's tenure on the global stage neared its twilight. The leaders of the world's largest economies posed for a final family photo, ensuring Biden was front and center before he bid goodbye. While symbolic gestures dominated the summit's finale, the undercurrents of international diplomacy, climate policy, and the evolving war in Ukraine painted a far more complex picture. In a bold and unprecedented move, Ukraine has begun deploying U.S.-provided long-range missile systems, marking a significant escalation in the ongoing conflict with Russia. On November 19th, Ukrainian forces fired the Army tactical missile system into Russian territory, targeting an ammunition depot near Karachev, roughly 75 miles from the Ukrainian border. This strike represents the first use of NATO-made long-range weapons against Russian assets inside its own borders, a step Kyiv has been lobbying for over many months. The decision to equip Ukraine with ATACMS marked a watershed moment in U.S. policy. For much of the conflict, Western allies hesitated to provide weapons capable of striking deep into Russian territory, fearing it would provoke a dangerous escalation. However, with Russia receiving substantial reinforcements from North Korean troops, and as the war dragged into its third year, Biden made the calculated decision to remove these restrictions. The ammunition depot struck by Ukrainian forces is just one of hundreds of potential targets that Kyiv can now reach. This newfound range is reshaping the battlefield dynamics, forcing Russia to relocate key military assets further from the front lines. For example, in September, Ukraine used long-range drones to attack a major arsenal nearly 300 miles from its border. These strikes serve a dual purpose, degrading Russia's military capabilities and signaling to the Kremlin that its once secure strongholds are no longer invulnerable. One likely focus of Ukraine's long-range capabilities is the Kursk region, where Russia has stationed over 50,000 troops, including an estimated 10,000 North Korean reinforcements. This area has strategic significance, as Ukraine reclaimed parts of it earlier this year. Analysts suggest that targeting logistical hubs and command centers in Kursk could not only protect Ukrainian positions, but also weaken Russia's ability to sustain its offensive operations. A fragile global stage. While the conflict in Ukraine intensifies, the G20 summit offered a glimpse into the shifting dynamics of global leadership. In Rio, the world's most powerful leaders gathered under the shadow of political transitions in the United States. With former President Donald Trump poised to return to the White House, speculation swirled about how his administration might reshape U.S. foreign policy. Trump and Vice President-elect J.D. Vance are expected to prioritize negotiations to end the war in Ukraine. Their rhetoric hints at a departure from Biden's robust support for Kyiv. Trump's past comments, coupled with his affinity for strongman leaders like Vladimir Putin, have raised concerns among Western allies about a potential rollback of military aid to Ukraine. Beyond Ukraine, President Biden used the G20 platform to champion his administration's climate agenda. Visiting the Amazon rainforest, he became the first sitting U.S. president to tour the region, a symbolic gesture underscoring the importance of conservation. During his visit, Biden announced the creation of an International Conservation Day and pledged additional financial support for protecting the Amazon. His administration has also invested heavily in clean energy infrastructure, with hopes of making these policies irreversible. China's presence loomed large over the summit, with President Xi Jinping positioning Beijing as an alternative to Western leadership. Over the past decade, China has become the largest trading partner for many Latin American countries, financing major infrastructure projects like ports and railways. As President Biden prepares to leave office, his administration faces significant challenges in solidifying its legacy. The escalation in Ukraine, the uncertain trajectory of U.S. climate policy, and the shifting dynamics of global leadership underscore the complexity of the current geopolitical moment. Finally, as the G20 summit demonstrated, the U.S. must navigate a world where its influence is no longer uncontested. The rise of the Global South, coupled with China's growing assertiveness, demands a recalibration of America's approach to international relations.